Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Joanne Giuliani. I think most everybody here knows her. She was once a registered nurse, and then she decided to become a doctor. I'm surprised she hasn't gone to law school, to tell you the truth, but she may be on the side, I'm not sure. She was a gynecologist in her early doctor years, delivered about half of the babies in Seaside, as far as I've heard. She was Lighthouse Doc. She helped start the lighthouse here back in 2000?
1999.
99. Okay, sorry, that's right. She's currently our district medical examiner and has been for about the past 15 years. She's saved our bacon many times, and she reviews medical records. She's just kind of the all-purpose medical person for us. So without further ado, Dr. Giuliani.
Okay. So, when I was asked to talk to you guys, I was thinking, well, what can I teach you? Because actually, you guys know a whole lot. But what you don't know is how many missing people there are in this county. So in addition to talking a little bit about water deaths, I want to talk to you about how many people are really missing out there, because you're the people who are going to probably run into bodies on the side of the road or bodies washed up on the beach, and it really helps if we have some idea of who's out there. Not that you have to remember this, because it's hard enough for me to keep track of it. Anyway, I have no dead people pictures. You'll be happy to know, because you guys don't need that. You see it enough in real life. I'm really thrilled I get to wear white, because I wear black all the time for very obvious reasons. So it's really fun for me to be able to wear another color other than black. Anyway, a couple of years ago, I know that one time I was on the beach with Matt, and there was a body on the beach, and I immediately knew who was missing. I used to have a Rolodex in my head, because I know all the people that are missing from Pacific County, our county, Tillamook County. So I kind of am aware of all the people that, when a body shows up, who it could be. And in the last probably 8 years, I have never had this volume of people be missing, and some in the water, some maybe in the water, some maybe in Peru, I don't know. But I've never had so many. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this, and I'm going to go through who's missing. And my second thing about water deaths is if I have this binge watching habit, like really bad, of Netflix, and if I see one more show where the drowning victim is floating on top of the pool, I'll go out of my mind. The last scene in Dead to Me, I don't know if you guys have seen that, but the very last scene is this guy who, I know, that's right, I can't, because it's great. But anyway, the last scene shows a person in a pool that had just been shot, and they're floating, and it just drives me crazy. Okay. So to keep it local, I'm going to kind of go through where everybody's kind of been missing from. So I have some really simple little Google map pictures. Anyway, so we have one guy missing. He went in, well, that's really big. He went in, right here in the shipping channel. That was in 2007. He was boating with his son and a friend. The boat capsized underneath, right in the middle of the shipping channel. The son and the friend were rescued, and he never was. And that was in 2007. We've never found him. However, when we went back and talked to the people at the marina, the father was actually never seen going into the boat. So, for the next 10 years, I have been in touch with his wife, who quickly married and moved to Washington like a year later, but that's, I guess, not important. So every time we have anybody show up in the river, I would call her. But anyway, he's been missing since 2007, but my gut feeling is he's really not in the water at all, which is part of the question and part of our problem. Excuse me. In around 2012, we have an abandoned car in the Megler. It was a young woman, last name Workala, owned the car. She's never been found, never been seen, and never been recovered. She had some internet searches done on her computer that looked weird. She was into the weirdness that, people that are thinking about committing suicide might look, but also people that might want to sign out of society might also want to look at. So I don't know if she's in the water, but if she is, these two people, which is kind of a theme here, were both were in the shipping channel. Okay.
Can I
yeah,
go back to
of course.
the guy that's missing that nobody actually saw get in the boat? What's your theory on that one?
I don't know. He's never been found. And, the whole thing is where I'm going to talk about bodies don't just float out to sea. We never found a trace of him, but there also was never a trace of him actually getting into the boat. So,
But the people who were rescued, they said he was in the boat, right?
no. Oh, well, yeah, they did, his son and his friend. And how convenient is that? And then when I went to get DNA samples on this family, they were really weird about it. Like, well, I don't know if we want to give them. So it's like, okay, that's a little weird. So I don't know. And that's the question, and that's what we're going to get to about death certificates, because you guys might have some questions on that, which we'll get into. That's the whole problem. Okay, the next case was 2016, and the guy, it's an old 87-year-old guy missing from Cannon Beach, and he's still missing. He went out for a walk, and he's never been found. Now, oftentimes, we will find these people. I know we found a young man who committed suicide. We found him a couple years later. We'll probably find this man a couple years later. But is he in the water? I don't know. The next case was in 2018. There is a 40-plus man who he left his car abandoned in Manzanita, but he supposedly was at Oswald West, and he has never been found either. So he's still missing. Whether he was in the water or whether he went on a hike or whether he committed suicide in some remote place, well, we don't know. But anyway, he's still missing. Even though he's in Tillamook County, as most of you may probably know, is bodies tend to flow north. They don't often go south. It's for a great reason, because then they all end up in my county, but that's kind of how they go. So if he's going to show up, he'll show up probably in our county. Okay, then the next couple cases are the ones that happened just really recently. We have a 19-year-old duck hunter who was on the islands. He was duck hunting. I love this. Is really, really weak. There it is. It's in these islands here. He went in like right around here, supposedly. He was duck hunting with his father and brother, but he was separate from them in a separate boat. He supposedly was not found. His father, he stopped answering his text messages. His father supposedly went to where he was duck hunting, and he has never been found. And this is another case where the only people who've seen this boy was a family, was his family. Once again, is he still missing? He's still missing. So with him, it was interesting. He went in the water in January, and at the time, the water temperature was about less than 40 degrees. And any time and that's what I'll get to, by the way, but when you have water that cold, they're not going to decompose and they're not going to float. So we did a significant amount of searches, and not just me, obviously, the Marine deputies are great. I work with them a lot. But we did a lot of, there was a super low tide, so we went out looking, because he would still be on the bottom because the water was really cold. And we looked all over those islands. They've been patrolling those areas, and he's never been found. And whether he's there or not is a point that we really still don't know. Okay, the next case that you know of locally, the 27-year-old woman, Maya from Astoria, last seen videoed walking onto the pier at Tongue Point and has never been found. The divers, I went out with the divers the day after she went in the water, so technically she should still have been near the pier if she went off the pier. But who knows if she didn't swim away, we don't know. But the divers went out, and it's the one time I think in my life I felt really sorry for McNeary. He was so cold. The water was so cold, it was scary. I mean, his hands were had no color in them, scared the crap out of me. So that was enough of diving. The person's dead. It's not worth risking somebody's health and life to find a dead person. So she's still out there. And then you guys probably all know that about on the 19th of May, we had a 24-year-old local kid. Well, he's a kid to me. He was a witness. He went in mid-span, went off the east side of the Megler on the shipping channel, and he still has not surfaced. Now, we know went in because we have a video, which is horrible, and I didn't bring it on purpose because it's just kind of a horrible thing to watch. Then a week later, we had another person. This was a 40-year-old guy. He drove his car from Ocean Crest. He said he was going to the bank. Instead, he went onto the Megler, did a U-turn, came around, and fell or jumped. I never know what to say about that, but did one or the other. Went in the water on the western side of the Megler in the shipping channel. He has also been filmed, so I know, so they're definitely dead. So those are lots a lot of people missing. Like I said before, I've been doing this since 2001, which is almost 18 years. We've only had maybe more than 2 missing ever. So we need to start having some of these bodies surface for me so I can relax. Okay, you know what's interesting, and I don't know if you guys know, in talking about water deaths, is a couple of years ago I had a Chinese national wash ashore in Astoria. And so I had a question, like, where did he come from? And I was asked to talk to the bar pilots. Well, what's really interesting, I don't think you guys know this, but if a person is missing on their manifest, like if they do a manifest at their point of origin, they come here, the bar pilots do the manifest for the staff on the ship, and if the numbers don't match, it doesn't matter. Like, they can't do anything because there's no authority. The ships are not American, they're out in the Pacific. So there actually happens all the time. So the bar pilots say, yeah, I'm shocked that these people wash up once in a while because, you don't like somebody, you toss them off the thing. They're not American citizens, and you have no authority to go ashore, and they have no authority to go on the boat to investigate. So interestingly enough, I didn't know that, and that's terrifying, actually, but a good way to kill somebody if you really need to. But anyway, so how does this whole thing work? About what do these families do with their relatives that are missing? Well, that's very interesting. If you've ever had a family member die, that death certificate is really necessary to do almost anything financial, anything at all. And death certificates, interestingly enough, on missing people are not given or very easily. Only one person in the state of Oregon can sign a body not found death certificate, and that's the chief medical examiner, which is now the new name for what we call the chief medical examiner. And it used to be Dr. Gunson. She was very liberal when I first got here. She'd sign him, if the guy went out hiking and he didn't come back, she'd sign him. But she kept finding people in Peru and Chile and Mexico that were supposedly dead, so she stopped signing any of them. Well, it's a new breed now, and at the time they have an interim state ME named Dr. Sean Hurst. I don't know his way of working yet. I just found it interesting because when I told him that these 2 jumpers were filmed, he insisted on seeing them, which I thought was a little weird. Like, he wouldn't believe me, like, I'm going to lie to him that I see bodies falling off the Megler. Anyway, I secretly think he keeps a stash of, like, really weird videos because he would want my chainsaw suicide pictures. And, those were amazing. And of all the pictures I could bring you guys, that would have been the one, because it's awful. But the part that surprised us the most is the lack of blood, by the way. The lack of blood, and I got into it, not that you need to know all this, but this is part of what I do that makes it really fun. I was talking to the state ME about it, and I said that there was only, you could see the carotids shooting out from his head that was no longer on his body completely, and you only saw 3 streams, and they're carotids. I mean, they went 20 feet. And I said that to the state ME. I thought they'd bleed out all over everything. There'd be a mess. And she said, no, that when people used to be beheaded, which is, boy, I get into some really weird topics, but when people used to be beheaded, that it was very valuable to collect the 3 heartbeats because it didn't bleed after that, and that kind of blood was blessed or whatever. But she said that when people get decapitated, the heart somehow knows the brain isn't still attached and only pumps like 3 or 4 times, which I didn't know. Because I was thinking, if you went at a chainsaw with somebody, you'd be covered with blood. Well, you really wouldn't be. So anyway, it was just something that I learned from that case. But he has those pictures. I don't know when they're going to resurface. Okay, so a couple themes that we kind of should pick up on, when I'm talking here, is that what happens. So when people have missing family members. The way that they have to go about it is they have to contact the state ME's office directly. They have to fill out paperwork asking for why they need a death certificate. It is not easy, and they don't do it without objective proof of death, which is very hard, as you could probably tell. So what do people do? Well, interestingly enough, they can be declared dead by the courts, and I kind of wish one of the judges would be here, and maybe I can ask Judge Matthias when she comes in. Oh, there you are. Have you ever have you ever had a person declared legally dead in this county?
I seem to remember one, but I can't tell it.
Right, and that's what I've said, is that it's not very common, not very easy. However, in Washington, they'll do anything. So it's like, I tell people, if they're from Washington, go to Washington. Even though the person, died in Oregon, go to Washington, because I have a couple of my families who have gotten their relatives declared legally dead by a court so they can go about their business. But I'll tell you, they're really screwed when they can't, and that really, sucks. So the lesson is, don't do this to your family, don't be missing or take off, and then they can never do anything unless you really want to. Anyway, so another one of the themes here is people disappear in the shipping channels. Not really anywhere else. I think by the number of people we find on the beaches, we figured out that a lot of people are found that go into the water. In the ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, they tend to resurface kind of where they went in, if they went in on the shore. So if you're walking into the ocean to kill yourself or drown or whatever you're gonna do, or clam or be stupid and wear waders and drown, you're going to come ashore pretty much where near you went in. I think we had an estuary death last year in Seaside. The guy showed up in the estuary not far from where he went in. That's great, because that makes our job really a lot easier. The inland rivers, so the rivers that aren't the Columbia, they're usually found very close to where they went in. It's pretty amazing. I've done a lot of these where I know where their boat capsized, or I know where they went in, or they fell off docks or whatever, and they really show up about 100, 200 feet from where they went in. So we're lucky that way. Boats, however, are a little different. When you're in the ocean or you're in the river, it's a little different mechanism. So around where we live, because of the jetties, and don't ask me to explain jetty science because I don't know that, the bodies usually will go from the Columbia and often come on to Social Security Beach. They never go north. I wish they would go north, but they don't. So everybody comes south, and we've probably had 6 bodies on Social Security Beach, which is pretty much common where they wash up. And they basically, as you know, come north from anywhere south of Hammond. They'll always go north. They're not going to go down to Tillamook Bay. And I know that has something to do with oceans, and I don't really care. I just know what happens to bodies. Okay, so in the Columbia, in the non-shipping channel. So when the shipping channel is so deep and the current is so horrible, when you're not in the shipping channels, the bodies tend to, if they go in, they tend to come out on the shores or on the banks of the river. So it's really pretty handy, for us. The problem is if they go into the shipping channel. And a couple reasons how we know they do is the ocean and the current of the Columbia strips people. So you find them naked, commonly. If they're fully clothed, they didn't go across the shipping channel and they didn't go in the ocean. It's just kind of that way. They stay, they could go in the ocean if they went in north of there, but I'm speaking of the current in the Columbia is just crazy. It rips your clothes off. So, when we find somebody, we kind of make it, I know Humphreys and I make a little joke to ourselves about where these people went in, just to see if we're right. And this brings me to a case in Washington. And I don't know if you guys remember that your sheriff decided that he wanted to pick up a body that was floating along the Washington shore of the Columbia, which, and it was fully clothed. And I'm like, because it's going to be a Washington body. And as you guys know, I have no jurisdiction in Washington, so I can't ask their sheriff's departments to help me because they don't really know me and they don't really care, and they have a coroner system and that doesn't work, and they don't do, you guys help me so much, you have no idea. But I was stuck there because I knew and Humphreys knew that this person came from the coast or the shores of the Columbia in the Washington area, because at that point where he was found at right here. That's where he came. So he had gone all this way, and the reason that we knew he didn't come from over here, because he was fully clothed. He still had his ears buds were in. He had glasses in his pocket. So I knew he didn't cross the shipping channel, and I knew he wasn't from Oregon. Yes, and that. Oh, you spoiled it. So, anyway, it was a great spoiler. That was a great case, and the case was really interesting for me because we, as it turned out, Humphreys and I were right that he came from Cathlamet, and so what I did is as soon as I got the body and then examined him and everything, I put a appeal out after about 2 days or so, and I didn't hear about anybody missing. I made an appeal to the newspapers in Washington, and I especially wanted to go down river, up river, whatever. I don't understand that part, but anyway, what we did is I put an ad out or a press release out to the Wahkiakum Eagle. I can tell you that within 15 minutes I had a call. And what the really cool part of it is this guy had on a fleece vest that was a women's size small. Now, he wasn't a guy who was a man's size small. It did not fit him. And it also had 2 initials in permanent ink on the tag, which I didn't tell anybody because I wanted them to be able to identify it. Well, as it turned out, this guy from Cathlamet, he lives right on the Columbia, which was very cool. He lives right here. So he lives right on this island right here. So his body went all the way up and then to the bridge. Anyway, what was really cool about it is, as his wife had died about 9 months ago, and he just couldn't get over it. So what he did is he walked around town every day with his wife's vest on. So the whole town knew this guy wore his wife's vest, which is very cool. And her initials, because she died in a nursing home, it was her initials on the tag. So that really helped me because he hadn't seen a dentist in forever. I was going to have a real hard time, and no relatives that we could find were very close. Anyway, the end of the story, and the really cool end of the story, is that I'm at his house, because I went over there to Washington to do the search of his house with Humphreys, and I was assisted by Wahkiakum, which were great, and also their assistant coroner is their DA, who's an EMT. So he had been to this guy's house on multiple occasions. So I went over there to search the house to see what I could find, and I got over there, and I see this the same stocks and bond company that I use, and I see this envelope sitting on his desk, and I thought, well, I'm gonna look, the guy's dead. And I looked, the guy's a millionaire, a literal millionaire. He lives in this ramshackle dump place. I mean, it's really nice. It's on right on the Columbia, but the bottom line is he's a bona fide millionaire. And it was just really interesting to see what his balance was, and his stocks and bonds were pretty amazing. Anyway, that was the coolest part of the whole story. His brother, who I finally found, was very happy to hear about that. As you could probably tell, I tried to become his relative, but they wouldn't go there. Okay, all right. So the last part I want to talk to you about is water deaths and how they work. But my first 17 points are bodies don't float when people drown right away, because that would make lifeguarding really easy. All you'd have to do is skim the water and take all the dead bodies that float up. They don't, they sink. Everybody sinks. So that when I had that guy that went off the Megler, I got a call 30 minutes later that he was spotted over in Warrenton by the dog park. And I'm like, well, there's no way in God's green earth that man who just jumped 30 minutes ago is now there. Just because the description matched, doesn't matter. It's not him. Bodies do not float when they first go in. the current affects where they land on the bottom, but it does not make them go out to sea. No matter how strong the current was, and the current that day was 7 knots, no matter how strong it is, they are not going to be swept out to sea. It just doesn't happen. So that how you figure out like where he's going to be or where a person's going to be who dies involves math. And I know, math, see? That is not what you want to see today. I know. So here's what happens. So bodies will sink. They just do. They're going to sink no matter how strong the current is. But the current will pull the body along as it's sinking. So I can tell you how to do this really quickly without even looking at it. So the way that it works is it takes a body to fall through water 1.5 to 2 feet per second in salt water versus fresh water. Okay, so what you do is you find the depth of the water. So if we use our guy on the Megler, the water at that part is 60 feet. Okay, so at 2 feet that he's going to go down, it's going to take him 30 seconds to get to the bottom. So you know, depth of the water divided by 2 because it's 2 feet per second, and the number of seconds to sink. Okay, so 30 seconds is half a minute. So in half a minute, that current is going to take him at a 7 knot clip that the guy went in. And then the way that it works is you then put I know, it's math. You put the percent, which would be 0.5, times the knots in feet per minute, and 1 knot is 100 feet per minute, so it's 700 feet per minute. So he was going to be 350 feet down the Columbia or towards the ocean after he jumped in. So it's not that he's not going to end up right down the bottom, but the current will take him, but he will eventually sink. And the thing with the first jumper is that he hit, I know I should probably tell you this, but he hit the platform on the way down, which gave me his wallet and his hat and stuff, but it's kind of gross. But he hit the platform. So did he fall, and is the platform now, and the platform isn't the platform, by the way. Underneath the platform are feet, like footers, 4 feet. Did his body, get up against one of those? Does the fact that it has 4 feet interfere with the current? So it just, my explanation is we don't send divers out to look for these people because it's like finding a needle in a haystack. You're not going to find them. There's too many variables. If you could say, yeah, if he's in a quiet lake or a quiet river, yeah, we could probably dive and try and find him, but the Columbia is a whole different animal and very, very dangerous for divers.
So 7 knots is going to go pretty.
It's going to
move pretty fast.
bad, exactly, but not out to sea. So not much. Yeah, really close. In fact, the port people have to inspect those footer things, whatever, on the bridge platforms. They have to inspect them once a year. And he says the divers actually go in, and it's so treacherous because they can't see anything, and there's actually a suction that when they go under, like the 4 feet are here, when they go under, they actually get sucked up, and they said it's just treacherous. But I know that when we went diving for Maya that night, it was literally a foot that you could see ahead. So it's great that we can try, but you can't expect to find, especially a person in the river. Okay, so we know that they eventually float, though, because I think all of us have pulled up a dead body. Well, hopefully I do most of them, but some of you guys help me. But they do, of course, float eventually, and why? Well, decomposition. And I know that you guys know this, and so the gases in the abdomen come first, and so the gases bloat up. They come to the surface, and they usually are face down. And then eventually the extremities also bloat. So then they sometimes flip over, depending on the weight, depending on all sorts of things, the forces. But that's eventually how it happens. Well, is it dependent upon anything? Yeah, it depends on the fat composition of the body, which is not really all that meaningful. But what is meaningful is the temperature. So in a 40-degree water, the time to surface is a lot longer than it is at 80 degrees. I think when people in Florida pop up like the next 12 hours, and they're really decomposed, so I'm kind of glad I don't live there. So actually, with our guy, our hunter, we really weren't sure that he was even going to decompose for the first month, because we were out there checking water temperatures, and the guys were out there checking, and the water didn't give to be above 50 degrees for a month, almost 6 weeks, I believe. So you can't decompose unless it's warm enough. And so if it's never going to be that warm, he'll never, they won't float up. However, it's warmer than that now, and like I said, we still haven't found him. His father disputes that because they were neoprene. So his father feels but what I think it did was maybe make him unsteady, like because they would float, so they tend to, if you're walking in your waders and then you go over your head, it's going to flip so that your feet and your legs are going to float to the surface rather than your chest, because your waders, the neoprene supposedly does that. I've watched a video after that case just to see if I could educate myself a little bit about it. But yeah, like I said, so there's this debate about waders. Rubber waders are death machines as far as I'm concerned, especially in rivers when they fill up. They're so heavy and you can't get out of them. It's a very bad idea. But they said neoprene's different. I don't know. We still haven't found them. Yeah,
Pair of waders that may trap air,
it may.
and they really float, or they're skin tight, and they just have a little influence.
Exactly, and so it's unpredictable. I think you can't make generalizations about a lot of this stuff that they think to. One of the questions I had is, like, how much weight does it take to have a body never come up again? And, I'm Italian and I don't even know. Well, I am. I was curious. I'm Italian and I still don't know that. I come from the East Coast. But I have not really, it's interesting. I Google all sorts of things, and I think if you guys ever arrest me, you're going to find the weirdest, searches on my phone that all have to do with, what do we do with dead bodies? What happens here? What happens there? Anyway. I know. There's not really an answer. There's not really an answer to that question. But when I went to the course that Ryan and Dawn and I went, it is half your body weight, so that, if you have a couple bricks, that's not going to hold you down, or a chair is not going to hold the body down forever. It has to be about half the body weight, which is actually pretty significant. Your body tries to get up no matter what happens. Okay, so this is the time that they wash out to sea. So you're not going to worry about people washing out to sea until they decompose. So, like with our two jumpers, now is the time. Both of them should be up, and they both should be washing out to sea. So the chances of finding, these men are probably not that good, because the current is going to take them. However, currents, the tide comes in and comes out. When they surface, maybe they'll come in on an ingoing tide. We don't know. So these men could show up anywhere. So they could be inland, they could be on Social Security Beach, they could be, who knows, floating beneath the Megler. We'll see. Okay, so the last part, pretty good timing. My last part is that, so what happens to bodies in water, and I know that most of you have seen a dead, I don't have pictures, and I didn't think that was appropriate, is they bloat, they swell up, they look a different race, because they get, you get the pink lividity from drowning, and then you get the skin peels off, and you get different colors, and they look black or they look white, you can't tell. So they lose pigmentation, they lose their hair. So the hair is shed with the skin, so oftentimes, seeing a bald person doesn't necessarily mean it's a man, because you lose hair. So you also lose fingertips. It comes off like a glove, which grosses out a lot of you when I get to do my fingerprints, because I do them. You peel them off and you put them on your finger and do fingerprints, which is what I get to do. They do, but tattoos are permanent. So tattoos are great. I know Chief Bowman and I have a memorable case of a guy with lovely, lovely tattoos, and but they stay. So tattoos are great. And in my men that fell off the Megler, I have tattoo information on those two people, and they're different. Thank goodness. And then the water creatures do their job, and the water creatures, they are crabs and fish or whatever. I don't need to know what they are. They take their toll, and they actually go for the icky places. They go for lips, eyes, ears, nose, all the things that you would use to identify somebody. So bottom line is, nobody's identifiable once they've been in the water for a significant amount of time. So showing them to families, that's not going to work. They're not going to recognize them. My job's getting less desirable as you guys hear this, right? Okay. So, determining cause of death in drownings, or in people found in water, I should say, is hard. The state, as you know, doesn't like to do autopsies. I think you're all aware of that. I am acutely aware of it every day. They are 49th in the country of the number or percent of autopsies done on dead bodies in their state. And that's, I think, abhorrent to me. I have families of young people who die who actually, it's really necessary to know if there's heart disease in the family. I mean, it affects their children. And, we can't get an autopsy to save our lives. Private autopsies can be done, but a lot of families around here don't have $2,000 to spend, and if they can even find somebody to do it. Yes, money. It's totally money. They don't want to put it in law enforcement or in anything that has to do with, But, what it's going to take is somebody important enough to have a death where an autopsy doesn't get done for somebody to speak up. So when families, yell at me about not doing them, I tell them, call your legislator, because that's where the money has to come from in order to hire enough people to do autopsies. Anyway. So we have to kind of guess, but not every body in water is a drowning, and that makes sense to you. So, I'm really hoping, that the hunter who's missing doesn't show up with a gunshot wound, and that's going to be a whole nother issue. But autopsies are really pretty necessary, and a lot of times for identification with drownings as they are in fires. They're the two cases where I really like to have an autopsy, because I can miss things, obviously. I can't see internal stuff, and the bloating just distorts everything. So you're not going to see bruising, and the little critters get at wounds. They like wounds, so they'll go after wounds. So if something looks like a wound, I won't know if it's a stab wound or a bullet wound. So anyway, I think that's really all I had to say. I could have talked about a lot of things, but I thought that this might help a little bit with some things. Plus, now you guys know who's missing. And you really don't want to help me, retrieve bodies out of the water after I've described them to you, but,
Yep.
Questions about anything?
Doc, drowning is a diagnosis of elimination, or?
Yes. Actually, yes. You know what? That was on this page.
Good.
Yes,
I
drowning.
read your mind.
Diagnosis of exclusion. And that's exactly what it is the reason that you can say a drowning, especially if somebody's been in the water a long time, because they're going to have water in their lungs because they've got water everywhere. All of their organs turn to goo on the inside. So you have no idea if these people drowned. But it's if they can't find any other cause of death, then they say it's drowning. And without an autopsy, you can't say. So, that's why I'm really funny about autopsies on drownings, because it's like, I don't know if they don't have a bullet hole somewhere, but it's absolutely a diagnosis of exclusion. And we don't do diatoms and all that stuff that you hear about on CSI. Our labs do not do anything even remotely close to that to determine what freshwater versus saltwater versus bathwater. They don't do them. So we can talk about diatoms, and they kind of laugh at me when I asked, so I won't ask ever again. Any other questions? Yeah. They probably would know better than I do. 50, 60, yeah.
What's the average, if it's not incoming or outgoing at the moment, what would be an average rate of flow?
How fast?
Yeah. It does vary. Like that day, it was ripping tide. And the day, actually, the second guy that jumped was a fish guide. And his wife said that he was very well aware, and he would have only gone out on a rapid outgoing tide. I mean, he even knew the tide tables that well. So, and it was a 7-knot tide when he went in also. So that's ripping. I mean, that's really quite a thing. But it varies. And I think that the other part is the platform exposure, because the platform has like a fencing gate around it. That also varies. The tides going in and out vary. I think probably about 10 feet maybe, I think about 10 feet on the bridge itself at midspan. You never thought you'd learn all about the Columbia River from me, but I find you have to know this stuff in order to put things into context, so it's kind of interesting. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks.
We are extremely privileged to have Dr. Giuliani as our medical examiner, and